Hello writer, and welcome back to my life. It's Writer Wednesday, the day where I give you my tips and advice on the art and the business of writing, tell you how I do what I do as an indie author. Today's question comes to us from patron Kristen Stevens, who asks, how do you find a cover artist that you like? That's it, that's the question. Oh boy, this is an interesting question, and I feel like we have been answering a lot of questions like this recently in terms of people to work with. We talked about editors recently, we talked about your review team and beta readers recently, and just as a quick aside, I take that as a good sign that the Writer Wednesday community is growing, and more people are needing to find more people to work with in order to actually take their books to a done. I hope that's the case with you. Feel free to let me know in the comments. But alright, how do you find a cover artist that you like? This is, again, one of those important ones. It's important because your cover is the #1 thing that's gonna sell your book. I mean, this is such a hackneyed joke in the indie publishing community, but everybody says you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but everybody does. Ha ha. Yes. No, it's 100% true. That's why people design book covers. If people didn't judge books by their cover, every single book would just be white paper, like cardboard. This would be every book cover if people didn't judge books by their cover. Because you know how long it took me to put this together? 30 seconds. So before you go about choosing your cover artist, or even beginning the search for your cover artist, you need to make many very important decisions about your cover. And the primary one of these decisions that you have to make is what kind of cover is it going to be? So I've talked a lot before about how you need to write what is important to you, right? You need to write something not because you think it's going to be the biggest money maker, or not because you think it's the hot genre right now, because that's just going to lead you to a career of misery, but because you want to write it, because you are passionate about it. And it has to be in a genre that you truly love, or a combination of genres if you are like mixing and matching things a little bit. That's fine. It needs to be something that is important to you and that is important to your heart when you're writing your book. But when it comes to cover design, you need to throw that whole viewpoint away completely. Every artist, every author, and particularly every indie author has to be able to switch between the art and the business side of things. When you are working on your book, that is when you put on your artist hat and you are working on your craft and you are working with your passion and your tools and your creativity. And then when it comes to your book cover, you need to not just take off your artist hat, you need to put it in the closet. You need to put it far away where it is not going to influence your decisions in any way, and you need to pull your business hat onto your head and strap it under your chin. Because if you make cover design decisions based off of the whims of your heart and, oh no, but I just really want it to be this way and everything like that, I mean, you can do that. It just won't sell any books. Cover design is the #1 part of writing and indie publishing where you must be absolutely 100% market driven in order to get the best results. Now, before anybody misunderstands or tries to intentionally misunderstand and say that I'm saying something I'm not, obviously you still have to be honest with your cover, right? And of course, that is actually being market driven. Like, you can't just design a cover that is going to sell a lot of books but is not representative of what's in your book, right? Like, you could design a cover that was very racy or looked a certain way or looked just like a Jack Reacher cover. You can literally just parrot a Jack Reacher cover. They're usually like a textured background and then a target symbol on the cover somewhere. You could literally just do that and people might assume that it was a Jack Reacher cover and buy it because of that. And then they would be very pissed off at you because you're not Lee Child and you didn't actually, it's not actually a Jack Reacher book. You can't do that. That's not being market driven. That's being dishonest and criminal. Designing a market driven cover means finding out what sells well in your market and doing that in a way that is representative of the book that your reader is going to read. So to my mind, there are 3 broad categories of book cover design. Okay? First is the graphic cover. This is where there isn't really any art. There maybe aren't people or anything like that. It's more about the symbolism of the thing, right? This would be, I mean, maybe like a sort of mediocre example of that. Like, it's just a simple graphical symbol that was designed to perfectly encapsulate what is in this literary book. And literary books is where you will primarily see graphic covers. Literary books and YA. YA YA lit books. YA lit will sometimes get into another one of the categories later, but a lot of them are graphic. Like John Green's The Fault in Our Stars. Graphic cover. One of the best graphic covers ever. And while we're talking about the Green brothers, Hank Green has a new book that is out for pre-order now, and that, he just released the cover on that. Another totally graphic cover. There isn't like a real image on it. It's more of sort of a very simple design that communicates a lot of meaning. So as I said, generally that type of cover design goes for literary work, young adult work, and some nonfiction does graphical covers that are very good. Okay, so the next broad category of covers is photoshopped covers. That's what I call them. I call them photoshopped covers. There could probably be a better and more descriptive name of it, but photoshopped covers, you get what I mean, right? Mark Dawson's books are perfect photoshopped covers. They are a photoshopped image of a running guy, usually with a gun, on a city background. And those are, you know, probably 2 or 3 different stock images that are combined in a creative and artistic way. But photoshopped images can be a lot more complicated than that. Like this is a Photoshop cover. This is the interim cover of Nightblade, after the first edition, but before I got my current covers. This is all Photoshop. This is images that were pulled from stock photo sites and combined to create this image. Photoshop covers are also massively popular in romance, where you will Photoshop 2 people together who are, you know, both very attractive people, representative of the main characters of your story, or, you know, maybe there's a photo of 2 people already together. And I've seen Photoshop covers that are also very, very popular in urban fantasy is a big one, and then there are actually some really legit looking military sci-fi and other sci-fi Photoshop covers. So you can definitely do Photoshop covers for genre. It's just very applicable to certain genres, right? And of course, the final broad category of cover is the fully illustrated cover, where every single pixel on the cover, except for the lettering, is hand-drawn by an artist. These covers can be complex or simple. My illustrated covers for the individual books, right, tend to just have one character on the front, so that's decently simple. You have to get the character design right, but that's about it. And then for the big volumes, you know, have multiple characters from an iconic scene in the book. As you probably already know, fully illustrated covers are immensely popular in epic fantasy. That's pretty much the default, the go-to standard for an epic fantasy book is an illustrated book cover. But illustrated covers are also very popular in sci-fi, particularly space opera, to the point that space opera covers can easily look a little bit samey, like they're all that one image of the planet in the background and then the tiny little ship flying past it or around it or into it or, you know, over it or whatever. And they're great. But I do like some variation from that very, very common theme. So the first big decision that you have to make is what kind of cover are you going to get? And that is entirely dependent on your genre. If you are writing epic fantasy, I firmly believe that you must do an illustrated cover. The one prominent exception that I can think of is George R. R. Martin and the Song of Ice and Fire books, which are photoshopped covers, right? It's just one simple image on a textured background. However, even those simple elements, they look like they could be illustrated. In fact, I'm looking at one on my computer screen right now. It might be illustrated. It might be an illustrated cover that just looks kind of photoshopped. There's a few different ones, and it's questionable, right? If you're writing space opera, I think you should have an illustrated book cover. I haven't done full market research on that, so if you are writing space opera, do your own research and see what works and what people are doing, and you don't have to do an illustrated cover if you discover that the biggest space opera books ever didn't have illustrated covers. If you're writing urban fantasy or paranormal romance or thriller or regular romance, you are almost certainly going to want a photoshopped cover. That is the standard for that genre. That is what readers of that genre are looking for. And if you're writing YA or young adult or some other genre where that is applicable, do a graphic cover. That is the first decision, because you can't go and find an amazing Photoshop cover artist if you're writing epic fantasy, because it doesn't matter how amazing they are and how easy they are to work with and how affordable they are. That's not what your genre demands. And while we're on the subject, just because I could totally see somebody bringing this up at some point in the future, if you want to talk about The Name of the Wind and how that is a photoshopped cover, yeah, it's also an awful cover. This is one of the worst covers I've ever seen come out of traditional publishing. I'm sorry, it's one of my favorite fantasy books. the cover is just not great. And I can say that because it's not my cover artist. Looking at you, Terry Goodkind. Okay, so you've determined what kind of cover that you need based on your genre. Now comes an even harder part, or a slightly less hard part. It's difficult, that's for sure. Now you have to go about finding the right person. Not just the right person, but the right person who you can easily communicate and work with. Not just the right person who you can easily communicate and work with, but the right person who you can easily communicate and work with and who you can afford. And I have no easy solution for you. I looked for a very, very, very long time before I found my current 3 cover artists, and I tried lots of covers before them that didn't work out for one reason or another. I have designed entire covers that were taken to full completion, and of course I paid for them and everything, and didn't use because the vision was not executed. It was not executed well. It was not executed correct. It was executed well, but just that artist and me didn't jive on what we were going for. And that is the thing. It doesn't mean that that artist was bad, right? It just means that we aren't in sync enough to work together as author and cover artists. I know they can turn out great work. I looked at their portfolio before I hired them. It's just, you will have compatibility issues. Just like we talked about before, you can find a really good editor who you cannot work with. And that doesn't mean that they're a bad editor. It just means that people are people. So why should it be? So you've got to do the grind. You've got to walk the beat. You have to go out. You have to look at art websites. Spend a lot of time on DeviantArt if you need an illustrated cover. Or there's good Photoshop work on DeviantArt as well. Talk to other authors. Find out who they used. Find covers from authors who are your contemporaries, who are sort of on your level, and say, where'd you get that cover? Talk to a bunch of artists. Find out how their process works. Find out how much they charge. You're probably going to go through about, 5 artists who you don't work well with, who would be perfect and their art is very good, but you don't work well with them or you can't afford them until you finally find the person who you work well with. You guys are just totally jive and in sync, and you can afford it. I will make a couple of recommendations, and these are people that I know personally and have worked with in one capacity or another over the years. My 3 cover artists for illustrated covers for the Underrealm books are Suthawat Dechakamfu, Saryu Ruangvesh, and Miguel Mercado, and I will drop links to all of their websites in the description below. If you're looking for illustrated covers, you should absolutely hire them. I definitely don't generate enough work to keep them working full-time, and boy, do they deserve to just have stunning careers as amazing artists. If you're looking for Photoshop covers, Dami over at Inspired Cover Designs is actually the person who designs the templates for the text of the Underrealm covers. So in other words, I get the artwork done, and then she does the layout of the text and, my author name and the title of the book and everything like that. If, she gives me a template, and I will, if I can do it myself easily, I will. But if I'm futzing around with it and I know that it doesn't look good, I'll just send it over to Dami and be like, yo, can you please just take care of this? And I send her some money. I will also drop a link to her website down below, but it is inspiredcoverdesigns.com, not .net, I hope. Anyway, the link in the description will be correct. And the best person that I can think of for more graphical covers is Risa Rodil. I have never commissioned a book cover from Risa, but she is an amazing graphical artist who has done lots of work with the Vlogbrothers and with me for merch. You know the Have I Mentioned I Write Books t-shirt? That is a Risa piece of artwork, and if I had a book named Have I Mentioned I Write Books, I would totally take that piece of artwork and just slap that on the cover, So I will also drop a link to Risa in the description down below. Now realize, all of these artists are amazing people, they're easy to work with, they are just super flexible, and I have had a great experience with them every single time. They might not work for you, because some people just don't work together. So if you do happen to reach out to one of these people and it doesn't work out for whatever reason, it doesn't mean that they're bad, it doesn't mean that you're bad, it just means that you need to keep searching until you find the people who you click with. That is what I feel like was a very, very long answer to Kristen's question. Thank you so much for the question, Kristen. I hope that you and others found the answer helpful. A reminder to everybody else watching this video that my $5 patrons on Patreon, like Kristen, are the only people who get to ask questions for me to answer in this video series, and they get these videos 2 weeks ahead of everybody else. So if that sounds interesting to you, check out my Patreon right over there. You can also check out the entire Writer Wednesday playlist up there. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next Wednesday. Bye!